The Unexpected Partnership Xenos. Yar's first day at the Galactic Academy was nothing short of overwhelming. The sprawling campus, with its towering structures made of crystalline alloys and filled with beings from every corner of the galaxy, was both awe-inspiring and intimidating. As a member of the Lean species, Xenos had always prided himself on his intellect and disciplined approach to life. The Lean culture, deeply rooted in tradition and order, had molded him into a model student. He had excelled in all his studies, particularly in military strategy, where his meticulous attention to detail and unwavering commitment to the principles of warfare had set him apart from his peers. However, nothing could have prepared him for what awaited him at the Academy. The Galactic Academy was renowned for being the melting pot of the galaxy's brightest minds, a place where the most promising students from different species came to hone their skills and prepare for leadership roles in their respective civilizations. Xenos had been both excited and nervous about the prospect of studying there. He knew that the Academy would challenge him in ways he had never been challenged before, but he was confident in his abilities and eager to prove himself. What he had not anticipated was being partnered with a human. Humans were a species that Xenos knew little about. They were a relatively new addition to the galactic community, having only recently made contact with other civilizations. Despite their late arrival on the galactic stage, humans had quickly earned a reputation for their ingenuity, adaptability, and unpredictable nature. Xenos had heard stories about human resilience and their ability to think outside the box, but he had also heard rumors about their brashness and lack of discipline. When Xenos learned that he would be working with a human cadet named Anthony Bailey, he was both curious and apprehensive. Anthony Bailey was everything Xenos had expected and more. Brash, overconfident, and with a seemingly endless supply of energy, Anthony was the polar opposite of Xenos. Where Xenos was reserved and thoughtful, Anthony was loud and impulsive. Where Xenos relied on careful planning and strict adherence to established strategies, Anthony seemed to thrive on chaos and spontaneity. Their first assignment together was a simulated battle against senior cadets, and it quickly became apparent that their approaches to strategy were vastly different. Xenos had meticulously analyzed the battlefield, identified key objectives, and formulated a plan that he believed would lead to victory. Anthony, on the other hand, had dismissed Xenos' plan as too predictable and had proposed a series of unorthodox tactics that left Xenos bewildered. Misdirection, psychological manipulation, and a seemingly reckless disregard for the established rules of engagement were at the core of Anthony's strategy. As the simulation unfolded, Xenos watched in stunned disbelief as Anthony's tactics, which he had initially dismissed as foolish, began to pay off. The senior cadets, who had been confident in their superior experience and numbers, were caught off guard by the unexpected maneuvers. The battle, which had seemed all but lost, quickly turned in their favor. Xenos, who had always believed that victory was achieved through careful planning and strict adherence to strategy, found himself questioning everything he had been taught. How could such a chaotic approach lead to success? Intrigued and frustrated, Xenos approached Anthony after the simulation. He needed to understand the thought process behind these unconventional tactics. Anthony, with his characteristic grin, suggested they discuss it over a meal in the cafeteria. As they down with their trays of food, Anthony launched into an animated explanation of human military history. He spoke of Earth's turbulent past, where humans had often been the underdogs, forced to outthink their enemies to survive. Whether it was the ancient wars of attrition, or the more modern conflicts that required guerrilla warfare, humans had always found ways to turn their weaknesses into strengths. Anthony recounted tales of legendary human generals who had defied conventional wisdom and achieved victory through audacity and innovation. Xenos listened, fascinated by the stories of human ingenuity. He had always believed that there was a single correct way to wage war, but Anthony's stories challenged that belief. The idea that adaptability and creativity could be as important as discipline and precision was a revelation to Xenos. However, this newfound curiosity also brought with it a sense of trepidation. The Lean culture valued tradition and order above all else, and Xenos knew that embracing such radical ideas could put him at odds with his peers and superiors. Could these human tactics, so different from everything he had been taught, really challenge the centuries-old doctrines of his people? The price of innovation. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Xenos and Anthony spent countless hours in the Academy's vast library, poring over ancient human military texts and analyzing historical battles from Earth's past. The more Xenos learned, the more he began to see the potential of combining human ingenuity with Leyan discipline. The idea of melding the two approaches was both exciting and terrifying. Xenos knew that they were venturing into uncharted territory, and the stakes were incredibly high. Their project quickly became the talk of the Academy. Some students were intrigued by the prospect of integrating human tactics into their studies, while others were vehemently opposed to the idea. The Leyan students, in particular, were divided. Some saw the potential for innovation, while others viewed it as a dangerous deviation from tradition. Xenos found himself at the center of a growing controversy, with his reputation and future at the Academy hanging in the balance. The turning point came when Xenos was summoned to Admiral Zorg's office. The Admiral, a towering figure with a reputation for strict adherence to Leyan military doctrine, was not someone to be trifled with. As Xenos stood before the Admiral's desk, he felt his antenna droop in fear. The Admiral wasted no time in getting to the point. He warned Xenos that pursuing such unconventional strategies could jeopardize his standing in Leyan society. The Leyan culture had thrived for centuries by adhering to a strict set of principles, and any deviation from those principles was viewed with suspicion. The Admiral made it clear that Xenos' future at the Academy, and possibly in Leyan society as a whole, was at risk if he continued down this path. The pressure to conform was immense. Xenos had always prided himself on his dedication to his studies and his commitment to the values of his people. The thought of being ostracized or expelled from the Academy was almost too much to bear. However, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something valuable in these new ideas. The success of their simulated battle had proven that there was merit in thinking outside the box, and Xenos couldn't ignore that. Desperate for guidance, Xenos sought out Professor Zara, a respected scholar at the Academy, known for her open-mindedness and willingness to challenge conventional wisdom. Zara had been a mentor to Xenos throughout his time at the Academy, and he trusted her judgment implicitly. When Xenos explained his predicament, Zara listened carefully, her multifaceted eyes studying him with a mixture of curiosity and concern. After a long silence, Zara spoke. She reminded Xenos that true scholarship requires a willingness to challenge preconceptions and explore new ideas, even when those ideas are unpopular or controversial. The Leyan culture had always prided itself on intellectual rigor, and rejecting new ideas simply because they were different was the antithesis of true scholarship. Zara's words galvanized Xenos. He realized that the pursuit of knowledge and innovation was more important than the fear of ostracization. With renewed dedication, Xenos threw himself back into the project alongside Anthony. They worked tirelessly, refining their theories and running increasingly complex battle simulations. The more they experimented, the more convinced Xenos became that they were on the right track. The turning point came when an emergency alert was issued, signaling the approach of an unidentified fleet. The Academy's leadership quickly assembled in the command center, where they assessed the situation. Long-range scans confirmed their worst fears. The fleet belonged to the Orcs Empire, a species known for their overwhelming numbers and brute force. The Orcs were notorious for their aggressive expansionism, and their fleet outnumbered the Academy's forces 10-1. The situation was dire, and the Academy's chances of survival seemed slim. The Academy's leadership was divided on how to respond. Some advocated for a defensive strategy, relying on the Academy's formidable shields and stationary defenses to hold off the Zorks. Others suggested attempting to negotiate with the invaders, though few believed that the Zorks would be willing to listen. Xenos, however, saw an opportunity. He stepped forward, his exoskeleton quivering with a mix of fear and excitement. He proposed using the unconventional tactics that he and Anthony had been developing. The idea of relying on misdirection, psychological manipulation, and hit-and-run tactics was met with skepticism by the Academy's leadership. The Leon commanders, in particular, were resistant to the idea of abandoning their traditional strategies in favor of what they saw as reckless and unproven methods. However, the situation left them with no other choice. The Zorks' fleet was too powerful to confront head-on, and time was running out. Reluctantly, the leadership approved Xenos' plan, and preparations for the battle began. As the Academy's forces mobilized, Xenos and Anthony took command of the operation. Academy S forces were made up of a diverse array of species, each with its own strengths and weaknesses. Coordinating such a varied force was no small task, but Xenos and Anthony had spent countless hours devising a strategy that played to the unique capabilities of each unit. The plan hinged on a series of coordinated feints and misdirections designed to keep the Zorks off balance. While the Academy's main fleet engaged the enemy head-on, smaller, faster ships would execute hit and run attacks on key targets, disrupting the Zorks' supply lines and command structure. Meanwhile, stealth frigates would slip behind enemy lines to sow chaos among their ranks, targeting communication relays and logistical hubs. The battle began with the Zorks' fleet advancing in a massive, seemingly unstoppable wave. Their numbers were overwhelming, and their ships bristled with weaponry that could tear through even the strongest shields. As the first salvos of energy beams and missile barrages lit up the void of space, it became clear that the Academy's defenses would not hold for long under a sustained assault. However, this was all part of the plan. As the Zorks pressed their attack, the Academy's main fleet began a controlled retreat, drawing the enemy deeper into the trap. The Zorks, confident in their numerical superiority, took the bait, advancing aggressively in pursuit of what they believed was a routed foe. But as they pressed forward, the true nature of the Academy's strategy became apparent. The first phase of the plan involved a series of hit-and-run strikes on the Zorks' supply convoys. Small, agile fighter squadrons darted between the massive Zorks cruisers, unleashing precision strikes on fuel tankers and munitions transports. These attacks, while seemingly insignificant in the grand scale of the battle, began to take their toll on the Zorks' fleet. Deprived of critical supplies, the Zorks' ability to sustain their offensive was gradually undermined. The second phase of the plan saw the deployment of the Academy's stealth frigates, Phantom and Wraith, to carry out deep raids behind enemy lines. These ships, equipped with advanced cloaking technology, were virtually invisible to the Zorks' sensors. Their mission was to disrupt the enemy's command and control infrastructure, targeting key communication relays and command ships. As the frigates carried out their raids, the Zorks' fleet's coordination began to falter. Orders were delayed or lost entirely, and the once unified assault started to fragment into disjointed skirmishes. With the Zorks in disarray, the Academy's main fleet executed the final phase of the plan, a counteroffensive aimed at striking the enemy's leadership. Xenos and Anthony identified the Zorks' flagship, a massive battleship at the center of the fleet, as the primary target. Taking it out would deal a devastating blow to the Zorks' morale and potentially force them to retreat. However, getting close enough to the flagship to deliver a killing blow would not be easy. The ship was heavily armored and surrounded by a protective screen of smaller vessels. Xenos and Anthony knew that they would need to rely on their most daring and unconventional tactics yet. Xenos volunteered to pilot a small, fast attack craft on a suicide mission to take out the flagship. The plan was simple but incredibly risky. Xenos would use the ship's advanced cloaking technology to approach the flagship undetected, then fire a pair of proton torpedoes at the ship's vulnerable thermal exhaust ports. The attack would have to be timed perfectly, as any delay or miscalculation could result in Xenos' ship being destroyed before it could complete its mission. As Xenos rocketed toward the enemy flagship, debris from the ongoing battle pinged off his hull, a constant reminder of the chaos and destruction unfolding around him. His heart pounded in his chest as he closed in on his target, the proximity alarms screaming in his ears. With a steady hand, Xenos lined up his shot and squeezed the trigger. The torpedoes lanced out, streaking toward the flagship with devastating precision. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a blinding flash, the torpedoes impacted the exhaust ports, triggering a chain reaction that tore through the flagship's reactor core. The explosion was cataclysmic, sending shock waves through the surrounding space and causing several nearby Zork ships to lose control and collide with one another. The destruction of the flagship sent the Zork's fleet into a full retreat. Their morale shattered. The remaining Zork's ships broke off their attack and began to flee, leaving the Academy victorious. As Xenos limped his battered fighter back to the Academy's flight deck, the realization of what they had accomplished began to sink in. They had done the impossible, defeated a vastly superior enemy using tactics that defied conventional wisdom. The Academy's victory was not just a triumph of arms, but a validation of the innovative strategies that Xenos and Anthony had developed. The boundaries between Leyan discipline and human ingenuity had been blurred, and a new path to victory had been forged. When Xenos climbed out of his cockpit, he was greeted by the sight of Anthony waiting for him, a wide grin on his face.
"We did it, partner," Anthony said, clapping Xenos on the back.
"We actually pulled it off." Xenos, still catching his breath, felt a surge of pride unlike anything he had ever experienced.
"Indeed we did, Anthony," he replied, his mandibles clicking softly.
"It seems your human battle tactics have some merit after all." As celebrations erupted around them, Xenos couldn't help but think that nothing would ever be the same. The battle had not only secured the Academy's survival, but had also signaled the beginning of a new era in galactic warfare. The rigid doctrines that had governed interstellar combat for centuries had been challenged, and a new approach, one that combined the best of both Leyan and human strategies, had emerged. The victory, however, was not without its consequences. The success of their unconventional tactics had drawn the attention of both allies and adversaries across the galaxy. The Academy's leadership, once skeptical of Xenos and Anthony's ideas, now saw the potential for revolutionizing their military doctrine. But not everyone was pleased with the changes. Factions within the Leyan society, as well as other species that valued tradition and order, were deeply concerned about the implications of embracing such radical ideas. Facing the backlash, in the weeks that followed the battle, Xenos and Anthony found themselves at the center of a growing controversy. Their success had made them heroes in the eyes of many, but it had also made them targets for those who feared change. The Leyan High Command, the governing body that oversaw all military affairs within Leyan society, was divided on how to respond. Some saw the potential for integrating human tactics into their own strategies, while others viewed it as a dangerous deviation from tradition. Xenos was summoned to appear before the High Command to defend his actions during the battle and to explain the rationale behind the tactics he and Anthony had employed. The summons was both an honor and a source of anxiety. The High Command was known for its rigid adherence to Leyan military doctrine, and Xenos knew that he would be facing a panel of highly conservative officers who would not be easily swayed. The day of the hearing arrived, and Xenos found himself standing before the High Command in a grand chamber adorned with the symbols of Leyan military history. The officers, their exoskeletons gleaming under the chamber's lights, regarded him with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Admiral Zorg, who had previously warned Xenos about the dangers of pursuing unconventional tactics, presided over the hearing. Xenos began his presentation by outlining the challenges they had faced during the battle and explaining how traditional Leyan strategies would have likely led to their defeat. He then detailed the specific tactics he and Anthony had devised, emphasizing how they had been tailored to exploit the Zorks' weaknesses and to compensate for the Academy's numerical and technological disadvantages. Throughout his presentation, Xenos was careful to frame the tactics as an evolution of Leyan military principles rather than a rejection of them. He argued that the core values of discipline, precision, and strategic planning had been preserved but had been enhanced by the addition of adaptability and creativity. The members of the High Command listened intently, their expressions inscrutable. When Xenos finished, the chamber was silent for several long moments before Admiral Zorg spoke. The Admiral acknowledged the effectiveness of the tactics, but expressed concern about the long-term implications of incorporating human methods into Leyan doctrine. He questioned whether such tactics, which relied heavily on unpredictability and psychological manipulation, could be reconciled with the Leyan ethos of order and control. The debate that followed was intense, with officers on both sides of the issue making passionate arguments. Some argued that the success of the battle proved the need for innovation, while others warned that abandoning tradition could lead to chaos. Xenos remained calm, addressing each concern with reasoned arguments and supporting evidence from the battle. As the debate reached its peak, the doors to the chamber suddenly swung open, and Commander Zarn, a highly respected and decorated officer, entered the room. Zarn was known for her strict adherence to Lean doctrine, and her unexpected appearance caused a ripple of tension to spread through the chamber. All eyes turned to her as she approached the center of the room. "Esteemed members of the High Command," Zarn began, her voice steady and commanding. "I have come to speak in support of Cadet Xenos Yar and the tactics he and his human partner developed."
Her words sent a shockwave through the chamber.
Zarn's endorsement was unexpected, and it carried significant weight. Zarn went on to explain that while she had initially been skeptical of the tactics, she had closely analyzed the battle and had come to the conclusion that they were not only effective, but also a necessary evolution of Lean military strategy. She argued that the galaxy was changing and that the Lean people could not afford to be left behind. The High Command listened in stunned silence as Zarn concluded her remarks. Her endorsement had shifted the momentum in Xenos' favor, and when the vote was called, it passed by a narrow margin. The decision was made to begin the process of integrating the new tactics into Lean military training programs, though with strict oversight and careful consideration of how they would be applied. Xenos had won the battle, but the victory was bittersweet. While he had secured the future of his ideas, he had also made powerful enemies. The divisions within Lean society were deepening, and Xenos knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. As Xenos left the chamber, he was met by Anthony, who had been waiting anxiously outside.
"How did it go?"
Anthony asked, his usual bravado tempered by concern. "We won the vote," Xenos replied, though his tone was more subdued than triumphant.
But the real battle is just beginning.
Anthony nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. The victory in the chamber was just the first step in what would be a long and difficult journey. The forces of tradition and innovation were on a collision course, and the outcome would shape the future of not just the Lean people, but the entire galaxy. The Zorks strike back as the Academy began the process of integrating the new tactics into its training programs. The Zorks' empire was not idle. Humiliated by their defeat, the Zorks were determined to exact revenge. The loss of their flagship had been a devastating blow, and the Empire's leadership knew that they could not afford to allow the Academy to emerge as a potential threat. The Zorks began to amass a new fleet, one even larger and more powerful than the one that had been defeated. Their plan was simple: to launch a full-scale assault on the Academy and crush it once and for all. The Zorks' leadership believed that by eliminating the Academy, they could prevent the spread of the unconventional tactics that had led to their defeat. The Academy, still recovering from the previous battle, was ill-prepared for a new assault. The integration of the new tactics was still in its early stages, and many within the Academy were resistant to the changes. The leadership was divided, with some advocating for a more aggressive stance against the Zorks, while others called for caution and diplomacy. Xenos and Anthony, now seen as the architects of the Academy's victory, were thrust into leadership roles. They were tasked with preparing the Academy's defenses and coordinating the response to the impending Zorks attack. The pressure on them was immense. The stakes were higher than ever, and failure was not an option. As the Zorks' fleet approached, Xenos and Anthony devised a plan that combined the best of both their worlds. They knew that the Zorks would be expecting the same tactics that had been used in the previous battle, so they decided to use that expectation to their advantage. The plan involved a series of carefully coordinated deceptions, designed to make the Zorks believe that the Academy was vulnerable and unprepared. The goal was to lure the Zorks into a trap where they could be defeated with minimal losses. The first phase of the plan involved creating the illusion of weakness. The Academy's main fleet was positioned in a way that made it appear smaller and less formidable than it actually was. Defensive installations were deliberately left unmanned, and sensor data was manipulated to give the impression that the Academy was still recovering from the previous battle. The Zorks, confident in their numerical superiority,
took the bait. They launched their attack with overwhelming force, expecting an easy victory. But as they closed in on the academy, they were met with a series of unexpected surprises. The first surprise came in the form of a coordinated strike by the academy's fighter squadrons. These small, agile ships launched precision attacks on key Orcs vessels, disrupting their formations and creating chaos in their ranks. The Orcs, caught off guard by the sudden onslaught, were forced to redirect their forces to deal with the threat. This diversion allowed the Academy's main fleet to reposition itself, closing in on the Orcs from an unexpected angle. The second surprise was the activation of hidden defensive installations that had been strategically placed around the Academy. These installations, equipped with powerful energy weapons and advanced targeting systems, began to unleash devastating volleys of fire on the Orcs' fleet. The Orcs, who had believed that the Academy's defenses were compromised, were now faced with a withering barrage of firepower that tore through their ranks. The final phase of the plan involved a daring maneuver by Xenos and Anthony themselves. They took command of a small task force of stealth frigates and used the Academy's extensive knowledge of the surrounding space to navigate through asteroid fields and debris clouds, approaching the Orcs' flagship from an unexpected direction. The Orcs' flagship, the heart of the enemy fleet, was the key to their strategy. Xenos and Anthony knew that if they could take out the flagship, the rest of the fleet would likely fall into disarray. The stealth frigates, equipped with cloaking technology and powerful torpedoes, moved into position and unleashed a coordinated strike on the flagship. The torpedoes found their mark, and the flagship was critically damaged. The Orcs, realizing that their command ship was lost, began to retreat. The Academy's forces, now fully engaged, pressed the attack, pursuing the fleeing Orcs ships and inflicting heavy losses. The battle was fierce, and both sides suffered significant casualties. But in the end, the Academy emerged victorious once again. The Orcs' fleet was shattered, and their plans for revenge were foiled. The cost of the victory, however, was high. Many lives had been lost, and the Academy's resources were stretched to their limits. Xenos and Anthony, though hailed as heroes, were keenly aware of the toll that the battle had taken. They knew that the Orcs were unlikely to give up so easily, and that the war was far from over. As the Academy began to rebuild and regroup, Xenos found himself reflecting on the lessons he had learned. The battle had reinforced his belief in the power of innovation and adaptability, but it had also shown him the importance of balance. The integration of human tactics had been crucial to their victory, but it was the combination of those tactics with the discipline and precision of Leon's strategy that had made the difference. The galaxy was changing, and the boundaries between species, strategies, and ideologies were becoming increasingly blurred. The future was uncertain, and Xenos knew that the challenges they faced would only grow more complex. But he was determined to face those challenges head-on, with the same courage and creativity that had brought them this far. The battle with the Orcs had been a test, not just of their military capabilities, but of their willingness to embrace change and to forge a new path forward. And in that test, they had succeeded. The Galactic Council's ultimatum word of the Academy's victory over the Orcs spread quickly throughout the galaxy. While many celebrated the triumph as a testament to the power of innovation and cooperation, others were deeply troubled by the implications of the battle. The Galactic Council, the governing body that oversaw interstellar relations and maintained the fragile peace between the various species, was particularly concerned. The Council, composed of representatives from the galaxy's most powerful civilizations, had always been wary of any force that threatened to disrupt the balance of power. The Academy's success in defeating the Orcs, a species known for its military might, had raised alarms among the Council members. They feared that the Academy, with its newfound strategies and capabilities, could become a destabilizing force in the galaxy. In response, the Council issued an ultimatum. The Academy must submit to an inquiry into its tactics and military practices, and any further development of these unconventional strategies would require Council approval. The Council's decision was met with outrage by many within the Academy, who saw it as an attempt to stifle innovation and to maintain the status quo. Xenos and Anthony, who had become symbols of the Academy's success, were thrust into the center of the controversy once again. The inquiry was scheduled to take place at the Council's headquarters, a massive space station located in neutral territory. Xenos and Anthony, along with a delegation of Academy leaders, traveled to the station to present their case.
The stakes were incredibly high.
The outcome of the inquiry would not only determine the future of the Academy, but could also have far-reaching consequences for the entire galaxy. The Council Chamber was an imposing sight, with towering columns and intricately carved walls that depicted scenes from the galaxy's history. The representatives, each dressed in the traditional garb of their species, sat in a semicircle around a central podium. At the head of the chamber sat the Council's leader, a venerable being known as the Arbiter, who had served as a mediator in countless interstellar disputes. As the inquiry began, Xenos and Anthony took their places at the podium, facing the assembled representatives. The Arbiter, his voice calm and measured, began by outlining the Council's concerns.
He spoke of the need for stability and the dangers of unchecked military power, emphasizing that the Council's primary duty was to maintain peace in the galaxy. Xenos, speaking on behalf of the Academy, began by addressing the Council's concerns head-on. He acknowledged the potential risks associated with the new tactics, but argued that the benefits far outweighed the dangers.
He emphasized that the strategies they had developed were not about conquest or domination, but about survival and the protection of their people.
Xenos went on to explain the unique circumstances that had led to the development of these tactics, highlighting the challenges they had faced and the necessity of thinking outside the box. He stressed that the Academy's approach was not about abandoning tradition, but about evolving and adapting to a changing galaxy. Anthony, with his characteristic enthusiasm, added to Xenos' arguments by sharing stories of human ingenuity and resilience. He spoke of Earth's history, where humanity had often been forced to innovate and adapt in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. He argued that the galaxy could benefit from a more flexible approach to strategy, one that embraced creativity and adaptability.
The Council members listened intently, their expressions varying from thoughtful to skeptical.
Some were clearly intrigued by the possibilities that the new tactics presented, while others were deeply concerned about the potential for abuse. The debate that followed was heated, with representatives from different species expressing their views on the matter. Some feared that the Academy's methods could lead to a new arms race, with each civilization seeking to outdo the others in developing increasingly destructive tactics. Others saw the potential for the tactics to be used as a force for good, helping to protect weaker civilizations from more aggressive powers. The turning point in the debate came when a representative from the Vexar Dominion, a powerful and influential civilization, spoke in favor of the Academy. The Vexar, known for their highly advanced technology and strategic prowess, had been watching the situation closely. The representative argued that the Academy's tactics represented a necessary evolution in military strategy and that the galaxy could not afford to ignore the lessons that had been learned. The representative's endorsement carried significant weight, and it shifted the momentum in favor of the Academy. The Arbiter, sensing the change in the room, called for a vote on the matter. The vote was close, but in the end, the Council decided to allow the Academy to continue developing its tactics, albeit under strict oversight. The decision was a compromise that allowed the Academy to continue its work while addressing the Council's concerns about stability and peace. The outcome of the inquiry was a victory for Xenos and Anthony, but it was also a reminder of the delicate balance of power in the galaxy.
The Council's decision had averted a major crisis, but the underlying tensions remained.
As Xenos and Anthony left the Council chamber, they were greeted by their fellow Academy members who had been anxiously awaiting the outcome. There was a sense of relief and cautious optimism among the group. They had secured the future of their work, but they knew that the road ahead would be difficult. The Council's oversight meant that every move they made would be closely scrutinized, and any misstep could have serious consequences. Xenos, reflecting on the events of the day, realized that the galaxy was at a crossroads. The old ways of thinking were being challenged and new ideas were emerging. But with change came uncertainty, and the path forward was anything but clear. The Academy had won a significant victory, but it was just the beginning of a much larger struggle.
The future of the galaxy was in flux, and the choices they made in the coming days would shape the destiny of countless worlds. As they returned to the Academy, Xenos and Anthony knew that they could not afford to rest on their laurels. The challenges they faced were growing more complex, and the stakes were higher than ever. But they were determined to continue their work, to push the boundaries of what was possible, and to ensure that the galaxy was prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. The final test as. The Academy continued to develop and refine its new tactics. It became clear that a final decisive test was needed to prove their effectiveness on a larger scale. The Academy's leadership, recognizing the importance of such a test, began to plan a series of war games that would simulate a full-scale conflict between multiple forces. These war games would involve not only the Academy's forces, but also the military units of several allied civilizations. The goal was to demonstrate the effectiveness of the new tactics in a realistic and high-stakes environment where the consequences of failure would be severe. The war games were scheduled to take place in a remote star system, far from any inhabited worlds. The system, known as the Talaran Expanse, was a vast and largely uncharted region of space, filled with asteroid fields, nebulae, and other natural hazards. It was the perfect location for a complex and challenging simulation. As preparations for the war games began, Xenos and Anthony were given command of the Academy's forces. Their task was to lead their units through a series of increasingly difficult scenarios, each designed to test different aspects of the new tactics. The other participants in the war games included the Vexar Dominion, the Leyan Imperium, and the Ventari Confederation, each of which brought its own unique strengths to the table. The war games were not just about testing tactics, they were also about building trust and cooperation between the different civilizations. The first scenario involved a simulated invasion of a fortified starbase, defended by the Ventari Confederation. The starbase was heavily armed and protected by a network of automated defense turrets, making a direct assault almost impossible. Xenos and Anthony, recognizing the difficulty of the task, decided to employ a strategy of deception and misdirection. They began by deploying a series of decoy ships, designed to draw the attention of the Ventari defenders. These decoys, equipped with sophisticated holographic projectors, mimicked the appearance and sensor signatures of real ships, creating the illusion of a massive assault force. As the Ventari focused their defenses on the decoys, the real attack force, composed of stealth frigates and boarding shuttles, approached the starbase from an unexpected angle. The boarding shuttles, carrying elite commando units, infiltrated the starbase's interior and disabled key systems, including the defense turrets and communications array. With the starbase's defenses compromised, the main assault force moved in, quickly overwhelming the remaining defenders. The scenario ended in a decisive victory for Xenos and Anthony, who had successfully demonstrated the power of deception and surprise in modern warfare. The next scenario was a large-scale fleet battle, pitting the Academy's forces against the combined might of the Vexar Dominion and the Leyan Imperium. The Vexar, known for their advanced technology and powerful warships, presented a formidable challenge, while the Leyan forces, with their disciplined and well-coordinated maneuvers, added an additional layer of difficulty. Xenos and Anthony knew that a head-on confrontation with such a powerful force would be disastrous, so they opted for a strategy of attrition. They used hit-and-run tactics to harass the enemy fleet, targeting supply ships and vulnerable support vessels. These attacks, though small in scale, began to wear down the enemy's resources and morale. As the enemy fleet grew weaker, Xenos and Anthony launched a coordinated strike on the Vexar flagship, using a combination of stealth frigates and long-range artillery to deal a crippling blow.